Credeva così di placare gli spiriti maligni che dovevano, secondo la profezia di una fattucchiera, ucciderle i figli.
The case of Leonarda is a conflicting one. Is this the story of a mother just trying to protect her babies, or a serial killer who loved killing innocent women? This is the case of Leonarda Cianculli, the soapmaker / cannibal of Corregio. Leonarda was born on the 14th of April, 1894, in the town of Montello, Avellino, Italy, which at the time was called the Kingdom of Italy. Not much is known of Leonarda's childhood other than the fact that she had a very painful one. You see, Leonarda was the product of assault, and her mother, upon finding out that she was pregnant with Leonarda, was forced to marry her father just to avoid ruin. So Leonarda grew up with her mother continuously resenting her. Her mother never failed to remind her that she was unloved and unwanted. Later on in her childhood, it was discovered that Leonarda also had epilepsy. So, a young child having to deal with severe hate from her own mother and having seizures every other day, it came as no surprise that Leonarda fell into deep depression at a very young age. You see, Leonarda tried to take her life multiple times. And after the first two unsuccessful trials, it was said that Leonarda's mother wept and told her daughter to try a little harder, and that she didn't even want Leonarda to be alive anymore. So over and over, Leonarda kept trying, eating the slots from her cassette, and even going as far as eating shards of glass, hoping that they would rip her from the inside out. But nothing was successful. Moving on to the year 1917, Leonarda had grown into a young woman, and her mother saw the opportunity to take their family out of poverty. So she convinced Leonarda to get married to a rich man who was coming after her. But Leonarda refused. She had fallen in love with a clerk at the post office. His name was Raphael Pansadi. And so, not listening to her mother, Leonarda went ahead and got married to Raphael. And this infuriated her mother. And so, Leonarda believed that her mother had placed a curse on them. Leonarda tried to find solace any way she could. So she started paying visits to fortune tellers and palm readers. One of the very first fortune tellers she visited told her that she would have kids, but they will all die at a really young age. And thus began the paranoid life of Leonarda. See, Leonarda would later go on to have 17 pregnancies and would lose 3 to miscarriages, and 10 of her children would later go on to die at an early age. The couple tried to get away from Leonarda's mother, so they moved to Pansadi's native town of Laria, where Leonarda was jailed for fraud in 1927. After her release from jail, the couple moved to Lacedonia Avellino, but was faced with more bad luck. Anonymous with Leonarda's story, an earthquake happened just after they moved there, and the family house got destroyed. So Leonarda and her husband packed up again and moved to another town. And this time, it was the town of Corregio. Soon after getting there, Leonarda opened up a little tea shop where she sold cakes and pastries to the community. Soon after, she added homemade soaps and candles and started life with her husband and 4 surviving children. Soon after, Pansati, her husband, started drinking again, so Leonarda pushed him out. And here she was, a single mother, barely surviving, just trying to protect her 4 kids. So Leonarda went back to what was familiar to her, the art of palm reading and fortune telling. So she started visiting fortune tellers and palm readers all over again. One particular palm reading stuck with Leonarda. See, the palm reader had told her that on one of Leonarda's palms, she saw an asylum, and on the other one, she saw a prison. Pretty soon, Leonarda started her own fortune-telling business. You see, Leonarda quickly discovered that she made more money when she told the women in the town what they wanted to hear. So Leonarda started selling false hopes and false solutions to the women of Corregio. Leonarda quickly built a name for herself among the women of Corregio. She was well respected and loved in the community. Things were going on for Leonarda, but pretty soon, tragedy was about to strike again, or so Leonarda believed. You see, her first son, Giuseppe, had been drafted for war. And going back to the fortune teller, Leonarda felt like she needed to protect his son at all costs. Leonarda didn't feel like the little rituals and offerings would do this time. She felt that what was needed was a life for another life. So Leonarda came up with a plan. She was going to have to kill somebody to protect her son. But she knew she just couldn't kill anyone. She had to be smart about it, and it had to be somebody whom nobody would come looking for. So Leonarda began to look for her unsuspecting victim, and soon enough, she found one. Her very first victim was a middle-aged spinster by the name of Faustina Setti. You see, all Faustina wanted was love. She was desperately looking for a husband and had been saving up for the day she would get married. Leonarda convinced Faustina that she had found a possible husband in the larger town of Pola. She insisted that Faustina told no one. She convinced Faustina to sell all of her belongings and bring the proceeds to her, and told her to write letters that would be delivered after her departure. So internally grateful to Leonarda, Faustina sold all of her belongings and brought all of the proceeds back to Leonarda, which totaled at about $530. But before leaving, Leonarda told her that they needed to celebrate with some wine. Unbeknownst to Faustina, the wine had been poisoned. And so after drinking the wine, Faustina became unconscious. And only then did Leonarda issue the mortal blow with an axe. She bludgeoned Faustina to death and painstakingly dragged her body across the room. She butchered her and cut her remains into 9 separate pieces. She tried as much as she could to salvage all the blood from Faustina's body. She cooked the remains and kept mixing till it became a thick, dark sludge. And then she disposed of it in the sewage. But the collected blood needed to be used. So Leonarda baked it in an oven, turned it into powder, and mixed it with her flour, her sugar, milk, and all of her baking goods, and created tasty little tea cakes. She fed the cakes to her son and her other children. But she didn't just feed them to just her son and herself. She also fed them to neighbors and friends who came into her shop. Leonarda was elated. She couldn't believe that she had gotten away with this. No one was looking for Faustina. Everyone believed that she had moved to the town of Pola. And so Leonarda began to think, is one life really enough? Would one life save her son from the incoming war? The answer to that was no. So Leonarda began to look for another victim, and almost a year later, she found another one. Her second victim was Francesca Suavi, another single middle-aged woman who was just looking for a job. Leonarda went through the same process with Francesca, taking all the proceeds from the sale of Francesca's belongings, drugging her, killing her, butchering her, and baking her blood. But this time, Leonarda went a step even further. She took all of the fat from Francesca and added it into her soap mixture. In her own words, she wrote, "I threw the pieces into a pot, added 7 kilos of caustic soda which I had bought to make soap, and stirred the mixture until it became a thick dark mush. I poured it into several buckets and emptied it in a nearby septic tank. As for the blood, I waited until it had coagulated, dried it in an oven, and mixed it with flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, and eggs, as well as a bit of margarine. Kneading all of the ingredients together, I made lots of crunchy tea cakes and served them to the ladies who came to visit. The Giuseppe and I also ate them." Leonarda was elated once again. She was beginning to feel so invincible. She had done this twice already and no one was none the wiser. She began to feel like the powers that be were finally on her side. Her luck was beginning to change. And so Leonarda thought to herself, why not do this again? Her business was becoming very successful and more women were confiding in her over and over. So Leonarda started looking for her next victim. And that same month, Leonarda found another. And this was 53-year-old Virginia Cacciapo. You see, Virginia still had big dreams of once again singing in the opera. And just like many other women who visited Leonarda, she confided in her. Leonarda smiled and thought to herself, yeah, I have the next unsuspecting victim. So on one of the many visits, Leonarda told Virginia that she had connections with an impresario in Florence and could set up an arrangement for Virginia to take the stage once more. So on the morning of September 30th, 1940, Virginia paid one last visit to Leonarda before she was set to leave Corregio and begin her new life in Florence. And just like the other two victims, Leonarda drugged her and bludgeoned her with an axe. But the disposal of Virginia's body was slightly different. You see, Leonarda complained in her diary that with the other women, those cakes tasted a little bit bitter and metallic. So with this set, she decided to go extra. With the soaps, she added a little bit of cologne. And Leonarda would later go on to say that this was the most creamy batch of soaps that she ever made. In fact, even the little tea cakes tasted better. In Leonarda's own words, that woman was really sweet. But Leonarda's luck was beginning to run out. You see, unlike the other two women who were lonely spinsters, I had no one looking out for them. Virginia had a lover sister-in-law called Albertina. Albertina grew really suspicious. She recollected that the day Virginia was set to leave town, she had seen her go into Leonarda's home for a visit, and no one had seen her since then. Virginia had vanished just like that. So she went to Leonarda and started asking her questions. But Leonarda denied ever seeing Virginia. She told her sister that she had given her the information about the impresario and that Virginia had left for Florence. One of the most disturbing facts about this story is the fact that while Albertina sat with Leonarda asking about her sister-in-law, she had no idea that she was eating the cakes that were just made from Virginia's body. Albertina wasn't satisfied with Leonarda's explanation, so she started doing some digging of her own. And pretty soon she found out that Leonarda had sold a bunch of clothes, hats and shoes that belonged to Virginia. And all of the people that Virginia was supposed to meet up in Florence were non-existent. So Albertina went to the police and expressed her concerns. The police opened an investigation into Leonarda. The circumstances were rather odd. 3 adult women were last seen with Leonarda. Police couldn't believe someone as advanced as Leonarda was capable of anything dangerous. They knew that the disappearances were connected to her, but couldn't really tell how. So they began to look at his son Giuseppe. He was the nearby adult male who was capable of doing something harmful to all 3 women. And now Leonarda was faced with a dilemma: protect herself or protect her son. After all, she had done all of this for Giuseppe. And so without hesitation, Leonarda confessed to all crimes. She gave the police a detailed account of what happened to all 3 women. It was a case that shocked the tiny town of Corregio. But because of the war, Leonarda had to stay in jail for a little while. And so, Leonarda had to wait in jail for 5 years. Leading up to the trial, a psychiatric evaluation was done to determine whether Leonarda was insane or not. And it was determined that Leonarda was sane. So she had done all of this knowing that she was committing a crime. While in jail, Leonarda wrote a 748-page memoir titled An Embittered Soul's Confession. In the book, she described her soap-making methods, her recipes, and how she used all of her victims' remains in meticulous detail. After 5 years in police custody, the triple murder trial began, and Leonarda wasted no time in telling her story. Spectators from far and wide all came to see Leonarda. You know, this story had been covered in papers almost daily, so a large crowd gathered outside the courtroom just hoping to catch a glimpse of the serial killer. During the trial, Leonarda showed no remorse for her crimes. In fact, she would most often correct prosecutors when they got details in her story wrong. Her eyes would shine with pride as she recalled what she did to her victims in meticulous detail. And so, after the closing arguments, Leonarda was described as softly weeping with her head resting in her hands. The jury deliberated for 2.5 hours, and Leonarda Cianculli was found guilty of 3 counts of premeditated, aggravated, and continuous triple murders, 3 counts of robbery, 3 counts of desecration of a corpse. The court also found Leonarda to be semi-insane and ordered that part of her 30-year sentence be served in a mental asylum. Leonarda tried to appeal her case a few times, but all appeals were denied. And this brings us back to the fortune teller / palm reader who had told Leonarda that on one palm she could see an asylum and on another palm she could see a prison. Was this truly a vision of what was to come in Leonarda's future? Leonarda was transferred to the judicial asylum for the women in Pausali, Italy. While in prison, Leonarda often spent her free time writing her memoirs, crocheting, and it was said that she loved baking for the nuns. One of the nuns recalled, "Despite the scarce means at our disposal, she prepared very tasty sweets that none of the inmates dared to eat." In the aftermath of the trial, though they would visit Leonarda quite often, all of Leonarda's family had to move away from Corregio, and not much is known about how they spent the rest of their days. Did her children die at an early age, or did they live to a ripe old age? Leonarda herself passed away from a brain disease on October 15th, 1970. She was 77 years old. Today, the axe, the cleaver, the hacksaw, the hammer, and the cauldron that were all taken from Leonarda's home during the span of the trial can be seen on display at the Criminological Museum in Rome. Bits and pieces of Leonarda's memoir are also on display. And that brings us to the end of Leonarda's story. Was this a mother just trying to protect her children, or a cold-blooded killer who used bad luck as an excuse? This is The Monster Under the Bed.